Hi, my name is Ray Hughes. This is for Testimony Tuesday. I want to give my testimony to the Lord Jesus Christ of what He's done in my life and where He's brought me from. Let's go back a little bit in early childhood. I remember in 1967, we had a big party for my cousin going off the Vietnam War. So that type of background that we had, there was a lot of drinking, a lot of things going on during that time frame, and that was kind of the norm of that lifestyle that we was brought under. Now, something happened about 1970. My mother had started going to church, and she gave her life to Jesus Christ. And little beknownst to us is we had a drug problem. We was drugged to church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, Wednesday night, Saturdays. We was out cleaning the church, but we was always a part of the church. And at 9 years old, I surrendered my life to Christ. I felt a true calling that God was speaking to me. And I went to the altar and surrendered my life. A couple of weeks later, they went out and cut the ice in the river and they baptized me. And I meant everything I did, everything I said, everything I was standing for. I wanted to live for Christ. But unfortunately, I allowed sin to step in. Sin stepped in. By 1974, they was rushing me to the hospital to have my stomach pumped, and because I had ingested gasoline and huffing gasoline to get a high. And that was just a start. By 1976, I was introduced to marijuana and hash and more booze. I'm just a teenage boy, and I'm doing these things. My life was spiraling downhill. By 1978, not along with the marijuana and the hash, and I started taking other drugs, anything I can get my hands on. Everything was just a fun. Everything was just fast. 1978, I was driving at this time. 16-year-old man driving down 39. 511 meets State Route 39. I rolled my car over. The state trooper said I was doing in excess of 135 miles an hour. I don't know how fast I was going. I pegged out the speedometer. But when that car started to roll over, I realized I was in a bad condition. And I cried out to the Lord with all my heart, God, save me from this. Don't let me die in this condition. I was fearful of dying and splitting hell wide open. And I felt a hand come up on me. The whole time this car's rolling, I felt a hand come up on my shoulder, and I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Nobody wore seatbelts back then. You're not going to die. You're going to go through some tremendous pain, but you're not going to die. I rode that car 300 and some feet over a length of a football field. I meant what I told God. Spare my life, and this day forward I'll live for you. I meant everything I said. They took me to the hospital and stitched me up. A few weeks later, I'm back on the road again. I didn't keep my promise to the Lord. It was my intention, but the friends, the partying, the background, I failed. I failed him again. I started getting deeper and deeper into drugs. Now I'm taking speed, acid, mixed with booze, marijuana, and hash. My life was a mess. But I was the king of the party. 1980, the FBI calls me in. I didn't know we even had a local FBI department. Down here on 13 where the post office is at, I found out real quick right where the FBI office was at. And they brought me in for questioning. I was scared. I was scared I was going to do some time. And once again, I made a promise to God, get me out of this. Lord, you get me out of this, I'll live for you. And somehow he did. And somehow I did what Ray does. I lied to him again. By 1984, I'm married. I have 2 sons. And I'm still living the life that I was when I wasn't married. But I couldn't handle the responsibility of being a husband, being a dad. Felt like I was a kid myself. I was in my early 20s, but still a kid. And my life became most miserable for me. I got to the point where I'd look in the mirror and I hated the guy looking back at me. I hated those around me. I was gruff, mean-spirited. Never had a good answer, a good thing to say to anybody. And I was most miserable. My marriage was on the rocks. And one Sunday morning, I got up about 7 a.m. and I looked around the house and I was most miserable. Just nobody's doing anything around here. I've got to do it all, blah, blah, blah. I looked over and the sink was full of dishes. Go wash the dishes. And I thought to myself, where in the world did that come from? And I washed the dishes. 5 minutes later, I found myself washing the dishes. Thought come to me, go to church. I'm not going to church. Where did that stupid thought come from? You've tried everything else, son. Why don't you try this? I'm not going to church. I'd be the biggest hypocrite in there. That's all that's in there anyhow, is hypocrites. I know few of them, not many. 11 o'clock that morning, there I am sitting in the pew by myself. I went in with my fake smile. Come home that afternoon. We'd party every day at work, every day before work, during work, after work. That was a way of life. Come that following Sunday, I felt that tug in my heart again. Go to church. So I went to church. And that happened 3 or 4, 5, 6 weeks in a row. Just every Sunday, good old boy, I'm going to church. But I was partying like the devil throughout the week. It wasn't very long, the Spirit of the Lord grabbed a hold of me. And it started dealing with me. And he started calling me. For week after week after week after week, month in a row. I was trying. I really was. I was promising God everything within me, just like all the other promises I made him. You watch. Next week, I'll come to church. Next week, I'll be able to hold my head up. Next week, you'll be proud of me. I won't do the things I did last week. The following week would come, and I'd hang my head in shame. They'd have an altar call, and that was all I could do to fight the tears, because I knew I lied to him again. I was trying to do everything under my power to do it my way. I could do it. I didn't understand that I had to surrender. I didn't understand that I had to give him total control. I thought I had to do it under my own will, my strength. I was going to be a good person. I remember that night, 1984, on a Friday night. They had the altar call, and I was able to withstand numerous altar calls prior to that. That altar call, they brought a man up from Lackey, Kentucky. He preached a revival. That man didn't know me, and I didn't know him. But he knew my life. God shared with him exactly what I needed to hear. And that night, I walked up that aisle, fell down at the altar, not knowing if God was real. And if he was real, could he forgive a sinner like me? And I remember my prayer distinctly, brokenhearted, tears flowing down my face. I said, Lord, if you're there and this is real, would you please come into my heart and forgive me of my sins? I meant it. I came to him with a broken heart and a contrite spirit, and he saved me in an instant. I'm wailing and I'm crying. Now these are tears of joy running down my face, hands of praise going up in the air. I tell everybody this, I get tickled. When I went up there to kneel down, I had hands all over me. Hands on my back, hands on my hip, hands on my head, hands on my shoulders, hands on my arms. And the men, they were there and they were praying. They were getting it down. And they prayed for 10, 15 minutes. And I thought to myself, Ray Hughes, you must have been a heathen. Because I was already done praying. These guys kept right on praying. Didn't know who they were. I later found out. I remember the pastor stood me up. He said, is everything okay? I said, everything's great. Everything's just fine. He turns me around to face the congregation. The house was full. There was probably over 200 people there that night. And he said, what's your name, brother? And I told him. He said, Brother Ray, do you have anything you want to say to anybody? I looked around that congregation. My eyes went left to right. And I looked back and forth. And I realized that there was only a few people in that church that I even recognized. Some of them just barely knew their name. But they had a glow about them. And that person that I said I hated everybody around me, and I hated the person looking back in the mirror at me, it changed. And I said, yeah, Pastor, I do have something to say. I said, I told the congregation, I said, I don't know who you are, but I know this. I love each one of you. I thank the Lord for you. That wasn't me. That wasn't me, none whatsoever. That's been over 40 years ago. I'll never forget the impact of surrendering my life. Couldn't do it under my own strength. The impact that happened to me that night. I can tell you the day and the time and the hour. I even know the hour that I got saved, 9:05, Friday night. Life hasn't been the same. I failed the Lord during my walk, but I come back to him with a broken heart and a contrite spirit. Lord, forgive me. He did it for me. He'll do it for who's watching, who's ever listening to this. Surrender. Surrender to the Lord and see if life doesn't become a joy.